Hi everyone, this is Mindy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be showing you a trick I like to use in ink blending, and I think this is really going to help you too. I'm going to be using a couple stamps out of the new Peace, Love, and Sushi card kit from Gina K Designs. You can see you are getting 3 stamp sets, 2 coordinating dies, a stencil, and 8 sheets of coordinating colors of cardstock. This is an amazing card kit for a great deal, so I definitely suggest heading over to the website and checking this out. For my card today, I'm going to be using Whisper cardstock, Lovely Lavender, and then I have Layering White and Heavy Base Weight White from Gina K Designs. For inks, I'm going to be using the Obsidian Amalgam ink, the Embossing ink, and for some colors, I have In the Navy, Wild Wisteria, and Edible Eggplant. To do my ink blending, I am going to be using a couple blending brushes. This is personal preference. You can use whatever blending tool that you prefer. I do happen to like how the brushes apply the ink. And then I'm also going to use the Gina K Designs Champagne Embossing Powder. So here's a look at one of the stamp sets in the kit. This is called Lovely Lotus. It is a large 6x8 stamp set with a couple beautiful floral images on here and then some accents to add to it. And I'm also going to use a sentiment from the Flower Child stamp set. I'm going to start off my card by placing it on top of my heavy base weight cardstock in the Misty. This is the new Misty 2.0. And I'm going to ink that up with the Obsidian Amalgam ink. I plan on doing some Copic coloring, so I want to make sure that this is a Copic safe ink, which it is, and I stamp that twice just to make sure that I have good coverage everywhere, and I really want these black lines to stand out. Now I'm going to work on the Copic coloring. So I am using some very, very light colors here. It's going to be hard to see on camera and maybe even in the picture, but it does add just a little bit of interest to the picture. I've honestly played with this image so many different ways, and I am very excited to share some of those ideas with you at a later date. But I'm starting this one using my Copic markers. This is BV000 and BV0000. So you can see it, they're very, very light. It's a light purple. I'm just adding some flicks of color. So literally just flicking the tip of my marker from the bottom of each petal and flicking up. So I'm not actually going to color in the entire flower. I start with the darkest of the two colors and then blend out a little bit with the lightest shade. And I don't want to color in that whole thing. I just want that little hint of color towards the bottom, kind of making it look like it's glowing from the inside of the flower towards the center of the flower. So I continue that process throughout the entire image. Now before I do any die cutting, I want to line up this additional image that's on the Lovely Lotus stamp set. This is so gorgeous, you guys. It is just a beautiful element to add to your Lovely Lotus image. So make sure your cardstock is dry first after you're done coloring. Then I loaded it back into my Misty. I'm prepping this with an anti-static powder tool, and then I'm inking up those details with the embossing ink. And I want to make sure I'm pushing down and getting coverage over the entire thing, and I do like to do that twice. Pretty much on every image I stamp twice just to make sure. Then I can sprinkle on the champagne embossing powder, and I like to, my card is actually kind of flat when I'm sprinkling on this embossing powder, and you can see I'm tapping that to shift that around, make sure it's really sticking into that ink, and then tipping it back down to let the embossing powder slide into my container. Then after my heat tool is nice and hot, I can bring it to my paper and melt that embossing powder. Now there is a coordinating die that goes with this, so I'm going to take that coordinating die, I'm going to line it up over my image, hold it in place with purple tape, or you can use washi tape or any other low tack tape that you have, and I place the sticky parts so that it's not touching my flower, just to make sure it doesn't rip any of my image, and then I can run that through my die cut machine. And off camera, I do cut that image out 3 more times. Now I have my lovely lavender piece of cardstock. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and this is the new Master Layouts 2 die set from Gina K Designs. I love the sizes that have been coming out lately. This one that I'm grabbing has some stitched detail to it, so I am going to die cut my lovely lavender cardstock out of that, and then I can work on my ink blending. The reason I die cut that first is because if I want to trim it down, I'm cutting off a lot of the ink blending if I started with the ink blending. So this way I'm starting with the exact size that I want. Then I'm taking the Wild Wisteria ink and picking some of that ink up with a blending brush. I like to tap off on the side of my mat first so I don't get the heaviest color right away. And I'm softly going to blend around the edges going in towards the middle. And this is the ink blending trick that I think really does help, and it also really adds a glow to your card, which is what I wanted for on this Lotus stamp set. So by starting with a light color cardstock, you're already speeding up your ink blending time. You're not having to apply as much ink. So I'm going around first with that Wild Wisteria, leaving that center part open. So that way that lovely lavender is showing through, and it almost kind of lightens. It's like an optical illusion. It lightens a little bit the more ink you're adding. Then I'm going to come in with the edible eggplant. I'm not going to go in as far with that darker color. And then I'm going to come in within the navy. And if you're familiar with Distress Oxides, this almost gives you kind of a blueprint sketch kind of look. It is a gorgeous color combination. So this is in the navy, adding around the edges to really give this some contrast from the center to the outside of the card. I have another time-saving tip that I want to share with you, and I'm just giddy with excitement by finding this out. So normally when I ink blend and I want to stamp a sentiment on, if you sprinkle on your embossing powder, you can see it's sticking all over the place because your ink is not dry. A lot of times I have to set it off on the side, wait hours for the ink to dry. Here is the magic tool. I have a mini mink machine, so you can use a laminator. I happen to have the mini mink because it is super quick at heating up. It only takes a couple minutes. I have it set on the number 2 setting. I'm placing my ink blended cardstock into that plastic sleeve that comes with the mink machine, and I'm going to run that through. This will dry the ink so quick. It only took a couple minutes versus I don't know how many hours waiting for my ink to dry because I'm so heavy-handed. So definitely a super great time-saving trick that you can add into your card making process. Now you'll notice that when I'm coming in to test this, I'm going to sprinkle that powder on and bam, it doesn't stick. So this is huge for me as I don't like to sit around and wait for things to dry. So I love this. I hope this tip has helped you too. Now I can work on embossing my sentiment. To make sure I'm getting perfect alignment, I'm just going to place my panel inside my Misty tool and line up my image where I kind of want it to be. It's going to hang off a little bit. And then I'm taking this Hello Friend sentiment from the Flower Child stamp set, which is in the card kit this month for August. I lined that up on my cardstock, picked it up with the Dora Misty, prepped the cardstock with an anti-static powder again, and then I'm inking this up with the embossing ink. Then I can sprinkle on this embossing powder, tap off any of the excess, and if there shouldn't be anything left, but if there is any little specks, you can take a paintbrush and just brush off any of the little flakes that might stick behind. After my heat tool is nice and hot, I can melt that embossing powder. And this is the Champagne embossing powder from Gina K Designs. I want to add dimension behind this panel, but I honestly struggle with foam tape, which you may have seen in other videos, because it leaves it kind of warped in places. So I am taking that same die, this is the stitch die from the Master Layouts 2, and I'm going to die cut it a couple more times from heavy base weight cardstock. Now what I'm showing you here is a trick for die cutting frames. I placed it on the cardstock and I tilted it so that the corners are going to go in first, or that one corner goes in first. And then that way my die cut machine isn't popping everything off, things aren't going flying, and I have 3 great panels that I can adhere together for dimension. I'm just taking a fingernail of mine and I'm scraping off any of the little hairs that might be left behind. And then using the dot runner from Gina K Designs, I'm going to attach all of these panels together. Now this is totally up to you. You can still use foam tape or foam squares. I just really prefer this nice even coverage. And then I can add my panel right on top. And it's all perfectly lined up since I used the same die that I used to cut out the front panel. I used that throughout the rest of them for that dimension. Now I wanted a little bit more of a magical look to this, so I'm taking some perfect pearls, adding that to my craft sheet with a few drops of water, mixing it together, and then just taking my paintbrush and tapping my paintbrush. I'm adding flicks of this all over the background. And I'll show you a close-up at the end. It's just something nice to add, kind of magical, mystical, to add to the background. Now here I had die cut that Lovely Lotus out of heavy base weight cardstock using that coordinating die. This is the same process I did with the panels. It's going to add dimension to my flower without having to use foam squares or foam tape. The main reason I did this is because of all those little petal pieces. I really wanted to have coverage over everything. So here I'll show you a close-up. It just adds a little bit to it, and I really like the look of this. Now we are in the home stretch of completing the card, so I am using Whisper cardstock as my main base, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I'm adding on a panel of white cardstock that I die cut using the Master Layouts one of the dies out of there to give me a white border around my ink blended panel. And then I can add on my ink blended panel all using the dot runner. I love the dot runner because it gives me a little bit of time to adjust until I really push firmly down. Then adding that dot runner also to the flower, I'm going to attach that to the front. There's going to be a little bit of overhang. Once I have that placed and I push down, I can take the scissors and trim off any of those petals that are overhanging. I'll then finish off my cardstock by adding some of the gems from Gina and her Connect glue. I'm only going to use 3. 3 is a very appealing number when you're looking at a card, so I'm focusing that around my sentiment, kind of forming a visual triangle. That finishes off my card for today, so I hope you really enjoyed it. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumbs up on the video so YouTube knows to share this with other viewers. I have a lot more inspiration over on my blog that'll be listed down below. And all the supplies I used today will be listed in the video description below as well. So I hope you head over, check out this card kit while it's still available, visit my blog for more inspiration. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.